temporary 7-hour ceasefire in the Middle East is over, and there are reports Israel and Palestine agreed moments ago to a new 72-hour one to take its place. Israel has resumed targeted strikes in Gaza after allowing some humanitarian aid in today. Hamas has also been firing missiles, and our own Sean Hannity knows firsthand because he's in Israel and heard the Iron Dome system go off this morning to intercept the rockets. Sean is joining us from outside Tel Aviv at an Iron Dome battery. Sean, can you just give us some perspective of what you've seen just in 12 hours since you arrived?
Dana, I got to tell you, it's an amazing experience, what it must be like day to day for everybody here in Israel and what they face. You know, in the course of our entire team being here, we counted some at least 50 red alerts that came up, in other words, where rockets are being fired. You know, in the middle of the ceasefire that was taking place earlier today, we were at another Iron Dome location. Remember, there's 9 of them that literally cover the entire state of Israel, and that's preventing those rockets from landing in population zones. But at one point, while the ceasefire supposedly today was in effect, literally, we heard an Iron Dome go off and take one of those missiles out of the sky. We not only were at the Iron Dome, we literally went to the border of Gaza today. We spent a lot of time. I think one of the more fascinating things beyond the work of the Iron Dome and how successful it is, we learned a lot, and we'll show this on Hannity tonight, where literally 9 separate areas protect the entire country. They are synchronized that as soon as a rocket is fired, that they will talk to each other via computer, and they'll determine where that rocket they expect is going to land, and then the computers will make the determination whether to take it out of the sky or whether they think it's going to hit an unpopulated area. Then we move to right where the border is, and we actually had time today to go into one of the tunnels that Hamas built. What was amazing about this is it is at least 50 or 60 feet underground. There was Israeli excavation around this tunnel, Dana, and then you get inside, and as I think you're running some B-roll of it right now, it looks small, the area that you see that I'm going in right now, but when you finally get inside there, I'm 6 feet tall. I only had to go down a little bit. It literally, if you're 5'10", you could walk in that tunnel and not have to worry about dropping your head at all. It goes on for miles. Here's the other interesting part. Those tunnels are reinforced with concrete, the ceiling, the ground. You have literally tracks so that they can bring things in and out of those tunnels, meaning where the terrorists are going through, and it goes all the way into Gaza. And we walked and walked and walked, and there was no end in sight. But that concrete and the lighting that is inside the tunnel literally is given by Israel to the Palestinians, so they're supposed to build hospitals and schools and homes and infrastructure, and yet it's being used for terror. The other big thing that we saw is immediately when we came out of the tunnel, being right on the Gaza border, we ran into a lot of the IDF, and they had just accomplished the mission, and they were pulling back a little bit from Gaza. I spent a lot of time with them talking about what it's like to live under the threat, why they're out there fighting, how important it is from their perspective to get rid of the infrastructure that is the Hamas tunnels and the rockets and what they're dealing with on the front line. So it was a pretty amazing day in just the short time we've been here.
Let me ask you first, Sean, before we take it around the table, given that you've talked to a few people, I don't know how many different types. I mean, I know you've talked to Israelis or any of the Palestinians there. Could you give us a sense of the mood from your perspective on the ground?
You know, it's funny, Dana, that's such a great question, because on the one hand, it's like life is normal. People are in their cars, they're driving around, they're going to eat. We went out to eat for like 10 minutes today. That's about how much time we had in the course of our day. You go into a restaurant, sirens start blaring. I happen to be in the bathroom at the time that the sirens were blared. That is the shelter inside of that particular restaurant. Yet everybody comes in, there are a lot of IDF people in there, and then they go outside. So for the 15 seconds that they've got to get into a secure area, they do it. Here was the more chilling thing that I saw, Dana. There was a playground that we came early in the day, and our cameras caught this, and we'll show this tonight, where there's a playground, and surrounding the entire perimeter of that playground, you literally have shelters where the kids are supposed to go as soon as they hear the sirens go off. I think we might have video there. And it doesn't look like much, but those shelters are above ground, and that's where the kids go. As they're playing, they're taught that's life for the average Israeli. And it's not just this latest battle that they're having with Hamas. This has pretty much gone on for years now, which is why every Israeli that I run into is pretty much committed to saying they've got to destroy the infrastructure that Hamas has built. Now, the one tunnel I saw is one of what they believe is at least 100 that have been dug in the time here. So we learned an awful lot about what the political mood is, how committed people are to breaking and defeating that infrastructure.
All right, Eric?
Hey, Sean, so the Israeli people, the IDF, Bibi Netanyahu, the resolve is strong, somewhere around 90% acceptance of what's going on within Israel. But when the UN starts pointing the finger, the White House starts pointing the finger, and then some of the left-wing media in the United States start pointing the finger at Israel, does that change the resolve of the people you're running into, whether it's the military or the regular Israeli folks?
You know, Eric, another great question. I'm not saying this because all of you guys are my friends here, but you're raising a great question. We talked specifically about that school. The people that the Israelis had targeted, they don't know who had the bombs, but they believe that they had explosives. That was their take on all of this. They were taking out legitimate military targets that they believe was Islamic Jihad, a more radical wing associated with Hamas that, again, were trying to bring war to Israel. As far as the politics of all this goes, it's very interesting. There's a lot of disappointment, I can say, in the administration. I'm not going to get too political today while I'm here, but there's a feeling that America, that had always been by Israel's side, should have a greater sense of moral clarity as it relates to who are the good guys and who are the bad guys here. 3,000 rockets. One of the things I tried to do, Eric, is since I've been here, is put myself in the position of all the people that live here. And if this is the United States of America, and it's 3,000 rockets being fired into our country on any given day, every day, and you've got this infrastructure and tunnel system designed so terrorists can come in and kidnap and terrorize the people of our country, I think we'd expect a very different response.
Greg?
So there's another ceasefire, Sean, which in Hamas means Monday. Is anybody taking this one seriously?
You know, Eric, between what happened last Friday and while we were on the air, when I got here today, supposedly I was on Fox and Friends this morning, and supposedly we were in the middle of a ceasefire, and we heard in the distance a Iron Dome taking out a missile that was fired. So I'm not sure anybody really has any faith in any ceasefires that are being built here. I know the Israelis have agreed to all of them. In every case, though, I'd make a strong argument that Hamas broke it. I don't think Hamas wants peace. And I'll tell you what, when you see the intricacy of these tunnels, Greg, and you see the amount of detail and engineering, it's an engineering feat that they have had. Imagine 50, 60, 70 feet below ground, and there's at least 40, maybe as many as 100, designed to get into Israel and attack the Israelis. That's a pretty strong commitment towards war, if you ask me.
Kimberly?
Yeah, hi, Sean. It's great to see you over there. I think you're doing a great job, and we're looking forward to tonight. Yes. So I want to ask you just some of the perspective perhaps you're getting there, that maybe if people had the opportunity to go to Israel like you have done, do you think it would change their minds and their opinion about Israel? Because they've had a tough time, the Israelis have, of garnering international support on their behalf.
You know, I've got to believe, KG, that it would change your mind, because when you hear these sirens day in and day out, every day, and you know that that's another rocket being fired, you know, the only thing I would say to the American people, forget what my politics are or your politics happen to be, or even Bob Beckel's politics or Juan Williams' politics. Imagine an American city having sirens blaring, having 15 seconds to get to a bomb shelter to protect yourself and your family. Imagine if you had an elderly grandparent that was living with you, or maybe you had 2 or 3 young children, that you had to get into that bomb shelter and you had 15 seconds to do it. I've got to imagine that the American response would be liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, is that you'd want to find the people that are putting you in that position. You'd want to deal with them in a pretty significant way and put an end to that threat. I think that's Israel's argument. The fact that there's world condemnation of Israel, it's a little hard to grasp, actually. You know, it's, to me, one of the main reasons I wanted to come here, KG, is that I feel that everything's sort of up and down here. Like up is down and down is up, and black is white and black, and there seems to be no moral clarity. There's a victim here. There's those that initiated war and those that are defending their homeland. You know, one thing, if you look at the terrain here, and I went through this as I was researching on the plane on the way over on El Al, you know, it's about 8,000 square miles that we're talking about in terms of actual space in Israel. You know, you compare that to the U.S., it's 3.8 million square miles. It's roughly the size of New Jersey, and it's surrounded by some, 22 or so Arab nations, many of which are enemies of Israel, and many of which have come out publicly on many occasions sworn to its destruction. Add to that terror groups, Islamic Jihad, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and then you add Iran to the equation, which I would say is fighting proxy wars and funding a lot of the battles against Israel for a long time. It is a significant enemy against a really small geographic area that we're talking about, and it's their job to defend their homeland. And one of the reasons, I talk to a lot of young kids, 20-year-old girls that are serving in the IDF, and I say, what do you think of your service? And their answer is, yeah, I'd rather be living the life of a 20-year-old, out having fun, going to university, but it is about saving my country from destruction and about the enemies that are sworn to wipe us off the map. It is a real, clear, present danger in the mind of everybody here.
Hey, Sean, let me ask you a question. We know that most of these missiles come from the Iranians and from Syria. The thousands and thousands and thousands of some of them are made in Gaza, but those are not the high caliber missiles. How do they get them in there? I mean, do they come through Egypt? Do they come? I mean, they certainly don't come in off the Mediterranean because the Israelis got that blocked off pretty well. They don't come through Israel, so I assume the only way they could get there is through Egypt.
You know, it's hard to say. I know there's been different blockades, Bob, that have been found. This terror network that we're talking about, I mean, even different terror networks that have their own personal disagreements, they agree on one thing, is that they hate Israel, believe that it ought to be destroyed, and don't think that Israel has a right to exist. Where the weapons are coming from, for example, when Nancy Pelosi, and I'm not trying to make a political argument, when she said, well, the Qataris tell me that they're a humanitarian group, well, the Hamas charter calls for the obliteration of Israel. So the Qataris are helping to fund the effort to give the Hamas and other terror groups the weaponry. And certainly Iran, I think, is the epicenter of a lot of the instability in the Middle East.
Sean,
I think they have fought proxy wars for years.
Let me just fast follow-up. Are these tunnels the way that these missiles get in? Wherever they get into the Gaza, do they take them into the tunnels and bring them that way?
Bob, I literally walked down a slope. There was a woman that was coming up this slope, and she couldn't get up. I literally walked halfway down the slope. I grabbed her hand. It was another press person, and I walked her up. It goes down 50, 60 feet, fully excavated, and then it opens up into the ground. Now, we have the entrance of the tunnel, and then you see how sophisticated it is there on the screen, and we'll show everybody about it tonight. I mean, when you think of the amount of manpower, money, effort, infrastructure that was put into something like that, that's only one of what they believe is about 100. So these are tunnels of war. Yeah, I think the answer to your question is certainly that's a possibility. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Sean. We're going to have to leave it there. You can catch Hannity at 10 p.m. Eastern, a special hour from Israel tonight. Don't miss that.